Today on Under the Banner, we're joined by Suze Chaplin, CEO and co-founder of ESB Connect, a leader in performance-driven email and identity-based marketing. Over the last decade, Suze has built a GDPR-compliant email community of over 17 million consumers, sent more than 1 billion emails for 600 plus brands, and helped household names like Aldi, HelloFresh and Clarks transform email into a true growth engine. She's also a passionate advocate for women in leadership and for making parental leave and work-life balance part of the industry conversation. We'll be talking about the rebirth of email, the future of first-party data, and what's really next for performance marketing in a privacy-first world. Think email is dead? Listen to this and think again. Hey Suze, welcome to Under the Banner.
Hi, nice to be here, Ollie.
Good to see you. Good to see you again. Nice to see you in London. It was a lot sunnier last time when we met outside wherever it was we were at whatever conference.
Madfest, which feels a long time ago already, even though it's actually probably only 3 months ago.
Yeah, you got a way better memory than me. All right, cool. Let's get straight into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you ended up here today talking to me?
Oh God, that's broad. Where to start? Yeah. I'm Suze, co-founder of ESB Connect. So we specialize in customer acquisition through email. How did I end up here? Well, that's a good question because my background did law at university and I always was going to go into criminal law and somehow have ended up in data and marketing, which is not where I thought I would be if you asked me 20 years ago. How did it come here? Well, I guess firstly, this was a stopgap before going on to do a master's in law and before going traveling. So just started in the advertising industry, doing performance marketing, really enjoyed it. And then suddenly came back from traveling, decided don't do that law degree. Well, do the law degree, but don't do the master's and go into advertising instead, which maybe was the wrong or right decision. Might have been a very wealthy lawyer by now, but you know, we'll never know. Sold myself. Essentially I worked in the affiliate space when I first joined the industry, which at the time was such, weirdly now because it's kind of the forgotten child in the whole overall mix. Back then was kind of at the forefront of, voucher codes, like these things that weren't used and were, suddenly changing the market and so many conversions. So it was quite an exciting time in that space.
I remember it well. I was at Trade Doubler for 7 years. I think that was my first role out of university, was at TD, 2002, I think. So yeah, I know that space.
Yeah, so right at the forefront. I always remember back then we ran a voucher code for B&Q, which was like download this voucher code and take it in store for 20% off. And which now would seem so, you would get some conversions on it, wouldn't it be huge? And it was like their biggest promotion they'd run, straight off the back of it, they had tracked like, a few £100,000 worth of sales immediately. And it was such a game changer back then. And then now, obviously, it's so run of the mill to have voucher codes.
Amazing. You can drive that much footfall in an actual physical retail store with a voucher code. Like now, as you say, would be a challenge, unless the offer was like ridiculously compelling, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be lucky getting, 10 to 20 into a store. It shows you how times changed. But yeah, so started in there and then essentially we started to see the shift from, I guess, traditional channels like affiliates to more programmatic spend and more display money going into display with the rise of like the DSPs coming into play. And I think back then it was like, well, email is a very murky channel to buy. It's hard to buy, but it actually does deliver good results. And so the idea behind ESB Connect was actually creating a programmatic buying platform for email, which made it as easy to buy as display. And that's really where ESB came about. And that was now, like 10 years ago. So we created what is still our core product to the day, marketplace, where people can come on and they can buy email audiences to drive acquisition. But I think we built it as a self-serve platform thinking, this is going to be used as a self-serve. Never was. It carries on being our core product. But what we kind of knew underlying was this whole idea that email would one day become an ID rather than just a communication channel. And I think over the last 10 years, we have ridden that wave many times. So every year, I think pretty much for the last 10 years, we've gone, this is the year the cookie's going to die and everyone's going to switch to email ID. And you're like, okay, not this year. Okay, this is the year. I mean, we nearly had it with like Chrome.
So close.
So close. We're like, it's finally the year that the cookie's going to die. Having said that, I think roll on to where we are now, even though the cookie is not going to die, I think people are now realizing that it's not the be all or end all, and they are looking at other IDs, and the whole idea of having this ability to connect up different channels. So while ESB's core product is still customer acquisition through email, we now do a lot with kind of using that email as an ID piece and empowering like addressable audiences across the full spectrum, so programmatic, social, and even offline into postal.
I think there was a lot of people that, when Google did say they were going to do that deprecation, that put a lot of effort into into tracking and targeting and measurement outside of cookies. And I don't think that work was necessarily wasted. I think it's given us, it's sort of born, the whole curation idea was kind of born out of that drive. And I think, through that, there's lots of really interesting things that have come as a result of people panicking and being forced down that road. So I think it's a shame. I always say let the cookie crumble, but it's a shame it didn't. But I think lots of good things happened as a result of them kind of threatening to.
Yeah, and I think even though it's still obviously prominent on Chrome, a lot of other platforms you can't use it. So
Sure.
I think it forced people to move out of their comfort zone and look at it in a different way and be like, that is part of the picture, but it's not the only element, which I definitely think was good.
Yeah. So you led we've talked a little bit about legacy ESB, this email business. You led the management buyout and transformed it from that legacy business into this data-driven marketing technology company. I just wondered what the biggest surprises or lessons that you learned along that journey.
I think one of the biggest surprises was how distinct direct marketing is from the rest of the world, and how within an advertising world, and how differently those two spaces work, from like a consent model to even like an understanding of certain terminology. Because I guess where we've always sat in email, and always the vision from the beginning of the company was it being an ID, we've kind of sat in the middle across email as a direct marketing channel alongside something like, say, postal or telephone. But it's also got this online ability to, reach into programmatic and social. And so then when we're moving our data in, one of the biggest surprises to me was when you start talking about consent, is they're two completely different worlds. Like a consent on email is very literal, like I'm opting in. Someone's very in the know of what their data is being used for, and they can control that really easily. It's all linked to their email address. They understand their email address. They can opt in and out. They can understand where their data is being shared quite easily. And then you went into this online world where you talk about consent on the email, and they're like, well, that's not consent. Consent's on a CMP. And then you're having these arguments over like, well, is one consent more valid than the other consent? Like, does a consumer understand a consent? How can you use the two different consents in different places? Like, do they work alongside? So is one overrule another, or actually are they two completely different things and you need both? And I think that was one of my biggest surprises, because in my world, consent is really simple, and in this programmatic world, consent was not simple.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big surprise.
Do you think consumers understand consent?
No, definitely not. Like, even I, as a person who should be more knowledgeable than, your grandma, even I struggle still, especially with TCF strings, like getting my head around and how it's all used. Because to me, consent's really black and white. Like, I've got something that I understand I own, e.g. an email address, and I can opt in and opt out. Whereas the whole idea of like cookies is something that they don't understand is about them, but isn't about them. It's not something tangible to them. And then understanding how when they're on a site and they're hitting and accept, they could be passing that consent to, another 1,000 people on it, which are quite heavily buried, and then how that whole world works. And I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, because, ad tech creates a lot of wealth, creates a lot of jobs, drives a lot of the economy. But I don't think the average Joe understands it.
Okay, maybe let's talk. We've talked about email as a kind of acquisition channel. What obviously linked to the back of that is the attribution side of things, and we talked a little bit about your kind of affiliate background. So, what's working and what still needs fixing in terms of attribution, attribution modeling when it comes to email? How we prove the value that we can talk about, last click wins and et cetera, et cetera. But I won't try and lead the witness.
Well, I mean, personally, I think attribution now is just broken, and the quicker we admit to ourselves that there's no perfect attribution model, the better. But the problem I think at the moment is that businesses are under pressure from a board level. So anyone who's spending in marketing has to prove that their marketing is returning something, and therefore attribution is almost more important than ever, when weirdly we're at a point where it's probably the least reliable. And I think that's one, because we're going into an era of zero clicks, where just because I clicked on a campaign doesn't mean that that led to conversion, but more likely is that I'll see a campaign, I can understand what the campaign is without clicking on it, and then I go into that site later and their attribution kind of referral link is lost. So I think when everyone's looking to prove an ROI, you're either reliant now on like post impressions as one factor, but then you layer in the next complication that, well, someone's probably unlikely to see an ad once and then convert. The most likely is that they've seen that multiple times in multiple places through multiple different providers and channels, and that led to the conversion. And I think that is the understanding that no matter what the fix is on attribution, you're never going to get a perfect attribution, because it's almost unconscious to why you made a decision to buy that brand on that day, because it's probably lots of little things. Having said that, on the flip side, like, email is probably the easiest channel in this new world to attribute at some level, to show the influence of. And the reason I say that is because you know who you've sent to. So if I take a list of email addresses and I send an offer for a brand, I know exactly who was sent to, who was delivered to, who opened and who clicked. And then you can have a look at who then converted on the site from the email address level or even a postal address level, and then basically match that back to, did that person get delivered an email for this brand? Did they open the email? Did they click on the email? And you can show the influence across that. So as we head into a zero click world where that's coming more and more prevalent, I do think email can be at a certain level attributed quite easily. But as I say, I'd say it with a loose view on what attribution is, because I think it's more of an influence. Like, okay, they clicked, they're probably highly likely the email influenced that decision. They opened, email was probably part of the decision, not the only decision. They were delivered it. They probably read the subject line in the inbox, and it had a weight on them making that purchase, but wasn't the final reason. And that's how I kind of see it, like, what is the influence we had rather than what's the direct attribution.
Yeah, I love that. It's that kind of multi-touch, different devices, different screens, different mediums, something on a connected television or a linear television, or are they all connected now? I'm never quite sure with CTV and TV how we kind of map all that and measure it. But yeah, certainly it's not as easy as it once was back in 2002 to say, hey, somebody's clicked on my banner, therefore you owe me 12.5%. Thank you very much. Within 45 days or 60, I think we changed the cookie duration to like 365 days towards the end of it. It became a bit ridiculous. But yeah, certainly I get that concept of everything coming together and there being multiple players. I wonder how you then reward everybody fairly for their contribution. Is it just the people that are closest to the brand and closest to the money that can claim, or does it all have to go to Google for their search click?
I think this is like the biggest challenge at the moment. I was on Ran panel maybe about a couple of months ago, and someone was like, attribution should be pulled apart from what you pay someone. Like, the two things should be distinct. And I was like, oh, there's actually quite a lot of truth in that. And I think now the only way to really pay someone correctly is probably go, I've added you in, has there been an increase in revenue? And if I take you out, is there a decrease? And is my overall spend delivering a positive ROI? As opposed to saying, from this channel, I have to get this ROI, or from this channel, I have to get this ROI, because I just don't everyone has a different role in the funnel. And I think it's so hard to, was it the first person who introduced the brand or the last person, or was it the person in the middle that repetitively educated them and got them over the line?
And is it because I saw an ad for a certain car brand when I was 10 years old that I ended up buying one when I could finally afford it at 40 or whatever? I guess that's got quite an interesting one. You've highlighted, I think I heard you talk about sort of creative and how it's overlooked in performance marketing. And so I wonder what sort of role you see creative playing in that whole world, and how you kind of optimize for that in your, sort of inbox world.
So I think, look at like your inbox and the email creators, and they're so boring. They're always like the same similar templates. If it's a brand pushing a sale, it tends to be a big hero image with 50% off, and then 4 or 6 products underneath. And that's really about as creative as we get in email. And you see a little bit around the sides that look better, but not much thought is put into it. And I think there's a few factors why. Firstly, it is like coding in the dark ages. You're limited in what you can do because Outlook, nothing works properly on it. You've got lots of different devices that need a render in a different way. So that is why I think people keep the design relatively simplistic. But 2, I think emails are relatively cheap channels, so you can quickly do a lot of volume on it without having huge costs. I think then people put stuff out a lot quicker without really considering it. I think that's the other error, that email makes a bed for itself from that point of view. But what I never get about email is that no matter how good your data selection is, the only thing the consumer sees is your email. They don't see all the magic in the data selection behind it. They're literally judging you on that email and whether the subject line is good for them, whether the email gives them what they expect from the subject line and also is easy to get off so they can understand where the call to actions are and they can understand what you're offering, and it's done in a creative way. And that seems to get overlooked in email. And I was thinking it even as much as when you're scrolling down your feed in social, we are all seeing what is resonating, and it's that human touch. So someone speaking to a screen, in this one, videos working well when people are seeing a single face speaking, or, it's an image of a person trying on clothes. But then you go into the email world and we don't take any of that, as if it's this whole separate space that all the tricks we know from social, from TV would never work in email. And email is just about putting that ad out with, 50% off and those 4 to 6 products underneath. And I just wonder if people should rethink that and, invest in how do we make our email creators feel more like a social space, and whether off the back of that they would see performance increase. Because we definitely see if you put effort into making nice images in email with good, clear call to action, you do get more clicks and you do get more conversions. So it makes a huge difference. So it shouldn't really be an afterthought, but it definitely is an afterthought.
Interesting. And does that necessarily mean that we need sort of use more of the emerging technologies in order to enable that? And if so, is there any particular one that's particularly exciting in order to sort of enable that next phase of creative within email? Is it AI, CTV, is it voice, etc.?
The problem with email is that you're so limited because it is old school coding. Within Gmail, you can actually do a lot more. You can do interactive emails. Even at some level now, you can do purchase journeys within the email without going off, but it's only certain inboxes that allow you to do that on certain devices. But I think it's actually more even more simplistic than that. It's look at what's working in social and can you repurpose it into email? So if you're doing influencer content, can you put that into there, the people pictures? If you're seeing that people are working better than lifestyle images, can you put that into your email? Video, there's nothing against having video in email. It's just that it tends to not deliver as well. But you can put short form GIFs into it. So you could have a 7-second GIF, which looks like a video, but obviously isn't a video. So I think it's starting to, you don't need to jump onto the AI trend or anything like that. It's just starting at real basics. What is working in other channels and how could I use it in email?
So refreshing to hear somebody say they don't need to jump on the AI or employ some sort of AI tool within their
I
stack.
actually feel like I do love AI and I love the future that it might have on like especially on the e-commerce space. I do think AI's been a bit overdone at the second, especially if you look at it from like a sales perspective and like B2B outreach. Like it's kind of like you just want a little bit of a like you don't need to write the email back to me with an AI. Like you can just write it as you would normally do. But now like everything, like all your responses, all outreach is clearly AI like generated half the
Yeah.
time. And then even like people you speak to every day, you're seeing like their emails are now being written by AI and you're like, yeah, I don't need an AI person responding to me. Just drop me a quick like 2-line like message. I don't know. I'm just finding it starting to get quite impersonal. And then because they haven't written it, you're like, well, do I bother replying? Because have you
Yeah,
even
am I just
realised?
going to get a response back from an LLM that's this? I quite enjoy. I was talking to Paul Evans yesterday about the way we use AI, and he was talking about sparring with it. Like if you have an idea, you just boot the thing up and start talking and run through ideas, and it was quite good for ideation and for sort of sense checking stuff. But beyond that, yeah, I'm not sure that I'm seeing a great use for. It's not changing my life or my world that much, I don't think, unless it is behind the scenes. I don't know what are you using it for that's helping you and that's making a difference.
So where I find it the most useful for me is like deep research. So if I want to look at, say, a brand and especially coming up with like creative strategies, like do a review of their consumer reviews, so read through Trustpilot, what are consumers saying are good about them, what are they not saying good, like anything in the news, competition, like what are other people in their space doing. So doing all that back research, so then if you're coming up with like creative strategy or ideas, it's better informed. So I find that really useful. I waffle, as you might tell from this. So
Oh,
my probably favorite thing is make this punchier, and it is very good at like taking out if I've written a really like long email, just shorten it down like these are the key points. So that I found really useful. And as you're saying, yeah, definitely like work as my thought partner. So like what have I not seen? And that can be from anything. You go into a board meeting and you can, spar with it, like what would they be looking for? You're going into new clients, like what do you think of this proposal? What questions do you think will come up? So it's the kind of behind the scenes bit, but where I don't think I was using it and now I wouldn't is like the actual outreach part. So using it in sales, I'm just like, no, no matter how good it gets, you can still tell it's AI. It's not natural language. It is, but it isn't. Like that's hard. It's just like a little bit of like, I wouldn't speak like that. It's like a bit too informal.
what do you think's driving it in terms of the adoption, and why aren't people? Because I agree with you 100%, and I use it where I sort of sparingly say for the research or for sparring. But what do you think's driving this? I was going to ask you because you talked. I noticed. Remember a second ago you were talking about email being relatively cheap, and I was always thinking that sort of the customer acquisition costs are ballooning. And I was going to ask you about what a more sustainable model looks like for customer acquisition. And I then just thought maybe that this whole AI thing is a way of trying to drive down costs. What do you think?
Oh, massively. That's my big worry at the second is I think we're not in the best economic market at the moment. Like, there's no denying that consumer spend is low, confidence is low, and so it's harder to get someone to spend on a product. And therefore, people are looking at the costs within their business. And I think everyone's going, well, I don't need a person there anymore because I can use AI. So I think there is a lot of pressure, one, on people to look at AI as a tool to make them more efficient so their output comes more. And everyone's knowing they've got to upskill in it. But two, I think then people are taking away some of the humans within their business and simply replacing it with AI because there's this promise that they can run a £20 million business with two people and lots of AI machines. The problem is that ultimately you could have AI running everything, but then who's buying? It's the consumer, and AI is always looking backwards and not forward. And they'll probably get to the point where it is good at looking forward, but who's going to invent the new trends? And all of those things, it's kind of like there always has to be a human touch if your end product is selling to a human.
Yeah, somebody was trying to convince me, someone at Cannes was trying to convince me that the publisher, the Telegraph, the big sort of broadsheet newspapers were going to be completely replaced with AI. And I was like, well, you need a journalist to actually go and report the story, unless you're going to, I don't know, send a drone in with a microphone strapped to the front of it and do it that way. But I kind of, they said by next Cannes, those big sort of traditional publishers would be dead, not because they're sort of a revenue model, but because the AI would have taken over and given something better. And I thought it was complete nonsense.
I think it's nonsense because I think there's a trust factor.
Okay, that's interesting to dig into. So ethics and trust, yeah. Let's have be interested to hear your thoughts.
I think it's not like that. I don't think AI is like say me and you are using AI, and not saying that it's not trustworthy in its answers. Like, yes, it does have hallucinations. You do have to quiz it. But I think the problem is in the news space, there's so many deep fakes now, and you're like very unsure of like, was that a real story? Did that person really say that? Were they even really there? Because AI is so good. I don't know if you saw there was that influencer who was at Wimbledon and she got like 100,000. Yeah, and she was never even there.
Tennis. I was all over that. Yeah, fabulous.
And you can just see that going forward. And I think, wasn't it this week, like the Pope in like some random outfit that again was a deep fake, and it was really well done. So I think then the news outlets are going to come, things like BBC News, The Guardian, The Times, them producing their own content. It is a human behind it, and you hope you can trust it. And I actually think people will travel to the actual news destination to ensure that it is actually their content. So, going to the Times or going to BBC News because they know that is a trusted outlet. So I think the weird thing is we'll go way more into AI, but actually way more human. I think behind the scenes AI will get used more and more, but over the top humans will come more important. And what I mean by that is I think in, say, e-commerce, I think there'll be huge improvements in digital stores, like they'll come hyper personalized, but I think people will value real life experiences more. So, going in, trying on clothes, etc. I think, for example, in sales, like obviously getting better personalized, more research on someone before you approach them will be enabled better through AI. But then I think like the in-person meetings, events, your personal connections will come where you get most of your sales through. So I kind of feel like in one way AI will enhance, but it will actually push the human touch a lot more, and like humans will come more valuable. This like human connection will come more valuable.
Interesting. I think that's true. There's a lot to think about there. So how do we talked a little bit about the sort of the trust element. I wonder how we build, how you guys with your specific when to email it, building that trust and offering that the value with consumers in order to get the outcome. Because in the face of all everything that you just talked about is all an antitrust sort of, everyone's sort of looking and scrutinizing everything. How do you what's the antidote for that? How do you build that trust and engage people in a more meaningful way?
Okay, I'll break that down because I feel like you could take it in a few different ways. But I think email as a channel, the one good thing for anyone is whether you use it for acquisition or retention or building up a subscriber base, is that you own that audience, so you can control that conversation, and they know if you're sending to them as an emailer, unless your domain's been spoofed, but they can recognize you as a sender, and therefore you've automatically got that trust element because they can see who's sending the emails, you're controlling that conversation, and you can nurture them down to whatever point you want to nurture them down to. So I think email is quite good at having that trust element on from that extent. But then from a consumer brand point of view, like how do you actually get that trust from the consumer in the first place? I think the whole value exchange is, so this is a weird thing to say. I think consumers are happy to give over their data and will give it over relatively freely as long as they see some kind of value back. And that value doesn't have to be huge. It could be a competition, it could be an article, but there has to be some kind of value exchange. And I think that's the one thing that brands, like, someone's just not going to give you their data if they can't understand the value. So just being very clear up front on what that value is, and then respecting it. So, not overexposing that individual, e.g., hammering them with emails or hammering with ads, or, calling them whatever it may be. Just respect and be respectful. And then I also think, from how you act as a consumer brand, from like things like we're going into November with Black Friday messaging. If you're going to do a discount on Black Friday, make sure it is your biggest discount. Don't the next day go into an even bigger discount, because it just feels untrustworthy. Likewise, if you've got a subscription product, make it easy to unsubscribe from it if they don't want to auto renew and things like that. So it's just elements of, like, make sure that you are living and breathing your values, because the cost of getting a customer is high now, and the cost of getting a repeat customer is also high. So if you can get them and you earn their trust and they come loyal, they're worth like their weight in gold.
I guess, well, I was going to say what I thought, but I'll ask you, it's here to ask you, what role do you think email has in increasing the customer's propensity to rebuy? So that customer, where does email fit in terms of that customer loyalty piece?
I think, again, because you control, I think the most important thing about email is, like, you can control that conversation. And even whether that's in the inbox or using that audience to target them in social, programmatic, you can control that conversation. So it's making sure, again, you're consistent in messaging, educating them, layering in more information so that you can nudge them across to a second sale. And that nudge doesn't always have to be like a discount message. It might be like, I'm buying from them because they now stock this, or I didn't realize about their ethics and they do this, and I'm actually, that's where I would want to put my money because I agree with their values. Or it's because you built a community out, like, say Sweaty Betty or Lululemon, like, or they messaged me about a run club and now I'm going to the run club every Tuesday and that's why I always buy from them. So I think it is just about the fact that you can control that conversation, and you have that permission to speak to them whenever you want to speak to them. Whereas social or programmatic, you're reliant on when the algorithms let you speak to them. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I think it's probably the thing that influences me once I've bought something, that follow-up email or that brand. I buy from Route One. You see the skateboards on the back, they're sort of men's fashion skateboarding company. I used to work there, actually, the e-commerce team, so I'm slightly biased, but I look forward to their One Hit Wednesday. Plug here for Route One. One Hit Wednesday email. They discount like a massive range of stuff every Wednesday, and I'm always keen to see on a Wednesday what if there's something that's going to appeal to me. But they also do the brand focus, and there's always something interesting. And I do often click the link. I'm a bit of a sneakerhead. If there's a new sort of collab and between a certain sneaker brand and an artist or something, then I tend to get in. But that email I rely on it in order to keep me updated and with what's going on, because I don't necessarily follow their social feeds or that kind of stuff. So for me, that's why I asked it, was because it particularly affects me. I often find myself another £100 down after a Route One email.
But I think you hit the head. It's their consistency of it. Like, you're going to get that on a Wednesday morning, so you expect it in your inbox, you're looking out for it, and you read it, and it's like, it just, if you can build that consistency in, like, the values or your communication, then people are going to watch out for it and they're going to become loyal. And then obviously your surprise and delight, like, oh, we've just done this collab, which you're like, oh, great,
Sometimes it's shit. It's like 20% off socks or something. I'm like, but then I will go and have a look at my sock drawer just to check, okay, well, maybe another pair of socks would be helpful. Anyway, let's zoom out a little bit. I want to talk about you for a second, if that's okay. You've spoken publicly a lot. I saw you on LinkedIn the other day talking about work-life balances and the challenges of being a parent and a CEO. I just wonder if we could dig into some of those sort of personal experiences and how they've shaped your leadership style, and some advice that you give to other parents or carers that are leading companies.
Yeah, so wrongly or rightly, I didn't take maternity with either of my children. Also, I think I was back at work, had him on the Thursday, working right up to his birth, like literally minutes before, and then back in. And same with like Harper. And why I say wrongly or rightly is definitely on the first, I was exhausted, and there were points, where you're not really present. because your just brain's so foggy. And probably the reality of the situation is like you just need to listen to your body and you'll be way better formed, being in for a couple of hours a day rather than trying to put pressure on yourself to be there all the time. And I think that just comes back to like a mum guilt, and running your own business for one is like, you feel like you have to be present, and then you have this mum guilt that you need to be present for your child, and then you need to be there for work, and you're not doing well at both of them, and so then your answer is to work harder at both of them, which ends up with you just being exhausted. So I definitely think with harp on the second time, it's just understanding that you can't have it all, and like you can't be, super mum and super boss at the same time, and that something has to give. And I think it's just understanding what has to give. Like, is it that you just get to your desk a bit later in the day and catch up on your sleep in the morning? Is it that you finish earlier, or you say no to certain things, like you're not going to that event late because you're not going to be sleeping through the night? So I think that's been a really important lesson, is just like understanding you can't have it all. Secondly, just being honest with people, like, I'm exhausted today, like I'm not on it. Oh yeah, I did drop the ball on that because, sorry, didn't have the best night's sleep and things like that. Because I think that's the other thing, is that with the first, I think I was just a little bit worried about ever admitting that I was struggling. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I barely had any sleep and I can't really remember what my name is, kind of thing. Thirdly, I also question whether I should have taken maternity with Harper, more from like it would be the only opportunity which forces you to take a break and therefore delegate a lot of things and put the right processes and structures in place when you're running your own business, not to be there. And it's kind of a missed opportunity in a way, because you want your business to run without you, and having a baby is probably that perfect moment to test it out, where you can dip back in if you need to. And I kind of feel like I did miss that opportunity a bit. And so I think in hindsight, I probably should have taken a couple of months off to force me to structure my business in a different way.
But you didn't have a co-founder, is that right? You took over from, how did you get into this?
So my co-founder was my dad. So he was the technical one, and I always looked after the commercial side. And the
That's
moral
so cool. I didn't know that.
Well, the moral of my story is never go into business with your family. I know there's been lots of successful family businesses, but personally, I just think a father-daughter maybe be different with different relationships, like brothers and sisters, but you have a view of what your parents are in your like family eye, and like, they're perfect. You have that relationship with them. Working in a business is a whole different side. And I think, like, do you want to tarnish your family relationship with a business relationship? And over the years, the way like it did kind of work for me was that I really segregated them. People found it funny. So I'd always refer to, so say I was having a conversation with you and you'd be like, what did you do this weekend? I'd be like, oh, I went out with my dad. And then I might be like, oh, I'd get Pete to have who's my dad's name, Pete, to have a look at that later. People would be like, are they different people?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, no, it's like, because it's dad when it's outside work and Pete when it is. And it almost, I'd created these two identities so that you could have a family relationship and a business relationship.
Yeah, you could have a good old row with Pete about, policy and, what a culture and all those other things that rub against us as leaders. And yet you can then go for a pint afterwards, or hand him a baby and expect him not to hold your row against you and to babysit. Isn't that fun? I didn't know that. That's cool. I think, I wonder how many people have got stories about starting businesses or working with family and friends to a certain degree, and the cases whether that's gone well or not so well. Maybe that's a whole other episode.
I definitely think it is. Like sometimes when I hear about, people work with their partners, like, and I know, oh God, one, I can never work with my husband. We're just totally different personalities. I think we do each other's head in. But I'm like, God, you would just live and breathe work all the time because you're never leaving it behind. But yeah, I definitely think it is interesting work. But then on the flip side, I think working with someone you've known for a long time, at least you can call people out, or, you know how to argue. And I don't mean argue in a bad way, but if you're like sparring on like, should we do this or not? You probably argue in a relatively healthy way because you're used to each other, and you can trust them.
Trust,
hopefully.
I was going to say, you think that your old man has got your best interests at heart. You might not see eye to eye, but he's not there. He's not going to screw you over. All right, fab. What should we do? Let's zoom right out. I think we could, let's wrap it up. I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests, which is, if you had the attention of the whole world for 30 seconds, what would you say?
What would I actually say? God, that is like, you either go really naff and be like, enjoy life and, it's only short, or you pitch your business if like that. Okay, this is, I feel like how shallow I could be, in the sense of like, if I was thinking about it from a monetary point of view, I would pitch ESB, like,
Front
if I was
center.
thinking, yeah, front and center.
Why not? And there's no wrong answer there's no wrong or right answer.
But if I was thinking about it not with a business hat on, and the opportunity that you'd be wasting by not talking about your business and progress and that, I can't just be talking about like just what is our future, and our future should be the ones we love and want to be around all the time, and just like cherish that, like, because it can go in a second. And just remember, like, money and work and everything isn't everything. Like, it's those small little moments that you actually take more like happiness out. So I think it'd be like, just take those moments. So yeah, either I'd be purely selfish and be like, here's ESB, you should spend with us, come and book a campaign, or go the other way.
Well, that's a really fun way to wrap up. So just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Suze Chaplin, ESB Connect.
Cheers, Ollie. Thanks for having me.